You must have heard the story about Atlantis. It's a civilization said to be lost by drowning in the waters off the coast of ancient Greece. It is actually just a myth, but maybe scientists have found this lost city. I don't know. What is clear is that they have found a lost continent. For a moment, my socks and marbles have indeed been lost before, but an entire continent disappearing? That's really careless. So, let's just ask our Earth. Adria Greater was lost between 100 and 120 million years ago. How could it have disappeared? Where did it go? Let's make an analogy. Imagine a snake moving through a rock or entering a hole. This lost continent is hard to imagine, just as difficult as finding a snake that immediately disappears from your sight, even though you are curious. Most snakes don't leave a trace. If 100 million years ago you didn't exist, and I wasn't born yet, then even if you saw a snake slithering under a rock, you wouldn't know what happened afterward. Scientists also wouldn't be able to find Adria if they didn't examine the traces left behind, in this case, mountains. For example, imagine the snake that was running away. It moved under the rock, and over time its skin changed. Its old skin peeled off and piled up in a small gap between the rock and the ground. In the same way, Greater Adria broke away from the giant landmass Gondwana. This Greenland-sized chunk moved north. Okay, we'll discuss Gondwana further later. When it finally hit Europe, the bottom of Greater Adria was pushed downward. So, the intersection of these two continents folded and bent. Over the years, the process continued, and the fold kept growing. Then this continent left a very clear trail. And you know what? It made me want to ski on the ice sheet. Let's turn to the Apennine and Alps mountains. Professor D. van Hinsbergen, a geologist, led a research team that played an important role in this major discovery in September 2019. He compared this folding movement to inserting your hand into a narrow gap in your sleeve. Because your arm doesn't fit smoothly, the sleeve bends. This curve is like a mountain. You must be curious whether other mountains also have the same origin. Yes, they do. Imagine you have collected sand with your hands. When you shift the sand, the peaks you form are like miniature mountains, like sleeve folds, snake skin, and sand ridges. These sand mountains stay in place when continental fragments collide and pile up. But what about the lost continents? As they move away, what happens? Like snakes hiding underground, Greater Adria also continued sliding below ground level. Dr. van Hinsbergen estimates that this continent may be located beneath southern Europe, as deep as around 1,448 kilometers. But whether its location is on land or under the sea, Greater Adria can still be called a continent. Just like snakes are still snakes even when they are underground. Of course they are. Even continents with most of their area underwater still exist today. I have heard about Zealandia, also known as the continent of New Zealand or Tasmantis. At first glance, it looks like an archipelago, a group of islands. But from above the water surface, it can be seen as one continent formed from submerged land. Only the mountain peaks rise above the surface, and these peaks are what we know as the islands of Zealandia. This includes microcontinents, which brings up an interesting question. What exactly qualifies a continent? This is still a matter of debate today. In fact, we are still disputing the numbers. If we do not count microcontinents and lost continents, generally the continents are defined as large landmasses. According to U.S. standards, there are 7 continents: Africa, Asia, Australia, or Oceania, Europe, North America, and South America. But Europeans combine Europe and Asia into Eurasia, so they only recognize 6 continents. South Americans also recognize 6 continents, but they separate Europe and Asia while combining North and South America. Even stranger, apparently, we classify Australia as a continent, while Greenland is not, earning only the title of largest island in the world. Poor Greenland. Actually, this classification relates to plate tectonics beneath the continents, but this video will not discuss that topic. So, where did this continent come from? When looking at a globe or map, you will observe 2 large landmasses around the Atlantic Ocean, North America and South America on one side, and Europe and Africa on the other. They look like pieces of a puzzle that can be fitted back together. Thus, a larger landmass was formed. This large landmass is called Pangaea. Scientists consider Pangaea to be a supercontinent, if it existed, but it broke apart 175 million years ago. Its shape did not split into 2 large pieces on the left and right as we see today. Instead, it likely split horizontally, leaving North America, Europe, and Asia still united in the north. We know this northern block as Laurasia. Meanwhile, South America was attached to Africa, Antarctica, and Australia on the landmass called Gondwana. From this Gondwana region, the Greater Adria would later break off. So, if you were to gather all the land on our planet, including continents, microcontinents, islands, and submerged lands, then unite them, a single landmass called Pangaea would be formed again. Don't forget the parts of continents underwater, such as land that once connected islands and land that disappeared over time. Oh yes, there are other lost continents besides Adria. After searching, scientists finally discovered one of them, the Rio Grande Rise. These underwater mountains are nicknamed Brazil's Atlantis. If Greater Adria is located between North Africa and South Eurasia, precisely around the Mediterranean Sea, and in the Mediterranean there are Greece and Athens, then you might suspect Greater Adria to be Atlantis. Historians believe Plato made up the story of Atlantis, but many people still think it really existed. If you believe the Greek myth about gods and goddesses punishing a civilization for starting a war with Athens, then the hypothesis sounds dramatic. But a more scientific theory says that Atlantis was simply flooded, or perhaps it was merely one of the separated islands that stayed in place while Greater Adria sank beneath Europe. Don't be disappointed when you hear this fact: Adria is not Atlantis. The tectonic forces continued pushing the Greater Adria into Europe more than 100 million years ago, around 80 million years before humans appeared on Earth. Of course, at that time, there was no war with Athens or any other conflict. You can ignore the myths and instead imagine the continents of this world as puzzle pieces forming Pangaea. Dr. van Hinsbergen and his team have devoted the last 10 years to trying to assemble these pieces. The process has been extremely difficult, especially because many of the pieces are missing. Ah, Adria, there you are. Luckily, scientists have sophisticated equipment to track the magnetic traces found in rock minerals. All rocks and mountains have a kind of identifier that describes the time and place of their formation, determined by Earth's magnetic poles. We know that the magnetic poles continuously change. This phenomenon is called geomagnetic reversal. Essentially, the magnetic attraction within deposits and minerals functions like a map and a calendar. This is how scientists know the origin of Adria, the location where it disappeared, and the objects it collided with along the way. By examining the magnetic properties of these samples, they also discovered interesting details, particularly how Greater Adria rotated and moved in circles throughout its journey. Until finally it hit Europe. Wow, this continent seems so enthusiastic about dancing toward the north, only to be stopped by the barrier we now know as Europe. That could definitely make for an exciting bedtime fairy tale. Well, I still have one more question. if Greater Adria sinks to the bottom of Europe, will it be able to appear again? Yes, it can, but continents continue to shift and are still moving today, although the movement is extremely slow. You would need to check back in 100 million years to know how many continents elementary school students will study in the future. That is, if we are still on this earth. This port is very busy. Thousands of people come here every day to work. Cargo comes and goes, fishermen weigh their catches all day long, and luxury cruise ships stop here to show this beautiful place to seaside tourists. Many people walk along the beach, eating ice cream or making sandcastles. Oh, by the way, we are now standing in what was once the Sahara Desert. Usually, our lifespan is too short to witness major geological changes. We don't notice mountains rising or rivers changing direction. Valleys may also sink, but this usually takes a very long time to happen. But recently, a group of scientists realized there is a new ocean forming, and very quickly. We can even see it emerging. Look at this. This is the Afar Triangle, a peninsula on the Horn of Africa. Not far from here is where the Sixth Ocean is forming. Wherever you are basically standing or sitting on a tectonic plate. You sitting on your sofa while watching this video is the same as your sofa standing on your floor, your house standing on the ground, and everything resting on one of the Earth's 15 major tectonic plates. Altogether, this layer is called the lithosphere. It's like an apple pie, the crust is the lithosphere, and the fragile apple filling is everything on the planet's surface. If the crust cracks, the filling seeps up. That's what tectonic plate earthquakes look like. The edges move, and everything living on top, homes, people, landscapes, gets disturbed. Africa consists of two major plates, the Nubian plate and the Somali plate. These two plates are constantly pulling away from each other, creating a rift that will eventually form an ocean. It appears the African continent is unzipping itself. Recently, around 895 square kilometers of the Sahara Desert split open, allowing magma to rise. This division triggered a series of earthquakes in Ethiopia and Eritrea, and the tremors were not small. Smoke rose from the crack, carrying a strong sulfur smell. The eruption slowly pushed away old lava layers, followed by the formation of a new seabed. The crack filled with magma, and when it cooled, a new ocean floor began to form.